Hey guys, welcome back to this channel. Today we're gonna record episode 11. On this episode we're gonna be fixing a few issues with our layout. The main thing that is bothering me now is the fact that we don't have a very responsive app. Like the rest of the app is responsive, but I want to fix that. So we're gonna tackle this first, and then when you subscribe to an event from the previous episode, we're going to finish that component as well. So let's start that, right? So if you open your VS Code inside your folder, the last work that we did was inside the dashboard, as you could remember. So just for those who are coming by right now for the first time, so we have a video series that you can go to the description, find the URL for the GitHub, where we'll find all the links for all the videos and the repo for this, so that you can start from where you feel more comfortable starting. The first thing I want to do here, guys, is start the concept of create a component, right? So we're going to create a folder here. That will be a component, and basically inside this component we're gonna start creating a new file that will be called topnav.js. This file basically will be a navigation that I want to add here. So we're going to remove this event and logout from here. We're going to add on that navigation, so it will have links for dashboard, events, and logout. And here we're going to transform this in a list, in a menu as well, so that we can do that a little bit better. Like I always try to say, my main focus here is not the CSS, because this project is quite big, so I'm focusing my time in the JavaScript and introducing you guys to new concepts. Context API, so we're gonna explore a little bit more. I'll give more details as we build it. First thing I want you to do is learn how to build new things, right, for the first time. So if you go for the React strap, we can see here the website that we visit a few times, and if you go to navbar, so this is basically where I'm copying all the bar that we're gonna use. So you can start the component basically copying from here. This will be a top bar that you would have a few options, as you can see. So we're gonna save this here. We're gonna do a few things to change here. So I'm gonna remove these props because we're not going to use that. I'm gonna rename the component using F2 to top nav, because that will be our top navigation, right? And then I'm gonna clean a little bit how it looks like here. And this nav brand is actually what we can see here, right? This is the nav brand, and the toggle is there. But I want to invert that in a way that the button will be on the left, and on the right we would have, instead of this, the logout button. So what we're gonna do will be a little bit different. So if you come by here and where you have the nav brand, we're gonna delete that. This will be the same, but we're gonna remove this class name. This class name is what keeping in the right side. So if you remove that, and then below here we're gonna import from the React router DOM that we used before, we're gonna import something called link. This is from the router because we want the capability of link using the route navigation. And just so that we clear, basically imagine when you click here, when you click in events, React does send you to the events page, but remember that this is a single page application. So that means if you refresh the browser, the difference is now it's the browser forcing you to that path instead of you navigating to there. So we want to use the router navigation, because then we don't force the browser to reload, and that's one less call that we do for the events and persistency of the data and everything else. So that's why we're using link. So then here what we can do, we can say link. This will be a component like so, and then basically inside this I want to do a logout. This will be our logout button, and a few things we want here. Here we have a to property. This to property is basically to tell React router where we want to send this, and then also here we're going to have a one click, and this is basically will be a function that will handle the logout handler, right? So this doesn't exist yet, so we're going to declare this function here. Basically I will show you how we do logouts right now. So if you go to the dashboard, let's go to page dashboards. If you see a logout handler, we're going to do the same thing here. So I will delete this function now. I've copied both of these things, and I will delete this because we are removing that from there. So you also can come here where we have the logout, and basically the events and logout button, we can delete that as well. So if you come back to the nav, this will be basically pasting that here, and there's a few things that we'll need to do, but not now, so that you're gonna understand a little bit better. So the next thing that we want is to create the items for where we actually want to send them. So here I'm gonna copy this a little bit. I'm gonna paste overwriting this. We want a link instead, and this one will be for the events. Here will be events as well. We won't need the handler in this one. Then I'm gonna copy this one and I'm gonna overwrite here, and this one will be our dashboard. So if you select both, it will be dashboard. Oops, actually the dashboard is just a dash, just remember now, and the events here is event, like so. So this should give us what we need to start with. Okay, so basically if you have a curiosity, because I copied from React strap, it came with two things that help us, right? So just so that you understand on the same page. So basically this is a state collapsed or set collapsed, and collapsed means it is closed, like so. So when you click, this is set false. When you do the toggling, is true and false. So that basically what that does, and the toggle navigation basically change that every time for the opposite value, right? With this expression here, with this bang. So the bang is always the opposite, right? Two bangs will be true and false. So that is. So it's very simple. I like this navigation quite a lot. And now that we have a top nav, we need to do a few things, right? If you go to the router, and there's a gotcha here, can you see the browser router? So we need to have the top nav inside this browser, and the reason for that is basically because the browser router set the property so that we can use inside the nav these links. Okay, so every time that you use links from React router DOM, it needs to be inside the browser router. So of course you can use in every single page the history. Remember how we're doing here, so that you're the same page. If you look here, I'm gonna delete that now. If you notice this history, this is coming from the router. Okay, so every time that we did history.push, when you do the login or logout, basically if you do that outside from the router's browser router, it would fail, because this is what inject the context from the router to the components. So now we have a navigation. Let's see how this navigation look like. Okay, so I can see the navigation already. It's kind of what we want. So we have dashboard, we have events, we can close. Let's go for the dashboard. Yeah, it's a little bit better. We can handle this soon, but look what happens now. If you log out, see what happens. We go to the logout page. Let's see if we remove the user and user ID, but we're still having a navigation, and we don't want that, right? Because this is like, I know that it doesn't work because we protected the route unauthorized, but it's not ideal. So basically what we can do, we can tell React that we're going to have a state that will be based on the user having a user object inside the local storage, and if we don't have any, we want to set that to false, right? So to start building that, I want to introduce you a new concept that will be a concept based on a global state that React has. So basically how we want to do that, I will create a user context file. So if you close your components, I will create here what I called a user context.js, and basically we're going to start to build our context. Okay, so from React we need to import two things: React, because we're using React, and use state, and then we're going to start to write our context. So the first thing first, I want to export a variable called user context. That will be our context. Context is like a state, but we use context for things that are is the context of the entire user that we're going to pass for every single place that we need it. So here you can use the react.create context, or you can basically also, if you want, you can do that as well. This is the same thing, and here we're creating a context. Okay, the second thing, we need to create a context wrapper that works pretty much the way I was explaining the router. So the router, this browse router, is nothing less than a context that is wrapping the switch and all the routers, and is sending this context down for everything that is a children. So we're going to use the same principle here. So what we're going to do, we're going to export and create a context wrapper. You could call this anything. You could call user context wrapper if you want to. Will take some props, and we're going to return a normal component. Inside here, we want to do a few things. First, let's define is logged in and set is logged in. Okay, so this will be our state, as we normally teach a few times, and we're going to start with a false here. I'm going to show you. Oh, I see. What I did wrong here is I missed the arrow. Okay, this is our first context that we're going to have, and then basically now we're going to define a few things here. We're going to define a user that will be basically like the context of our application. Then we're going to have here is logged in and set is logged in. That is the both state that we are interested. Now that we define what we want to pass as a context, we're going to return, and here is where the magic starts to happen. Here we're gonna define a user context. So we create this context here. So we're gonna use that like a component. However, we need to use a provider, props, okay? Yeah, like so. So now we have a context provider. We want to receive props. Now that we have a provider, we want to receive a props dot children. And what is a prop in React, right? I think we kind of did a lot with React, but I think you know what a prop is by now. But basically is a thing that you receive from your parent components, right? So basically every property that we receive that is passed to your context wrapper will come here, and we're going to use the children's here. So that means I can pass children's component to this context wrapper. That's basically what I was explaining here. So this is a component, and this is its children component. So now we can go back to the context, and here there's the last thing we need to do. There's a value that we need to pass, and this will be user. Okay, so basically we are creating this state and we are passing to the provider. Imagine that we have a state and a way to set the state globally for every single component that is a children of the context wrapper. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. So the next thing that we want to go back to the index, to the app.js, like so. And here we're going to import context wrapper from our user context, like so. But it's not default exportation, so we're going to use that. And basically now you're going to come here and add your wrapper all over the other components. So that means now the user context will be globally inside every single component that is here, because routes has all the components, so that means will be global for every single one, including the top nav. So now in the top nav, what we can do, we can use that context to basically check if you go to our app when you logged in or not, and show or not show the menu, right? So that's what we want to do. So if you go back to there, the first thing that we want to do, we will import the user context. So on top here you can say import user context. This will be from, it's not the provider, it will be the user context. So just to show you again, the provider is basically using the context and passing it as a value and receiving children. So this is a React magic, right? But what we want the context, so we need to use this one instead. So if you come back here, now you have the user context. Okay, so then what you can do, you can say here const is logged in and set is logged in. Basically it's the both names that we defined in here. Okay, so logged with two G's, yeah. So here you want to say use context that we need to import from React, and basically here we're gonna pass the user context, that is the user context. So now I have access to a global state. Okay, so this is not local like this one, this is a global. Okay, so that you understand the difference, and you don't want to use global state for everything. This is not recommended, and that can slow down your app quite significantly. So we use global context for few things. We use like for the login, logout for sessions, we use for theme. Remember that we need to keep in mind that if the app doesn't need to know about this context, it shouldn't know about this context, right? So I can delete these two things here as well. Just notice is gray, so you can remove that. And basically with this property now, what we can do, instead to return this, we can say, okay guys, so my mistake was setting this. This is actually, we are destructuring the status, okay? So what I did wrong was I was using the use context as a use state. This was a mistake. You need to destructure the object instead of be an array of objects, right? So that was a mistake, sorry. So let's carry on. Now, if you go to your page and you console that, you can see that we are consoling out the state that is false. So what we can do here, we can basically do a check. So if you do here, is logged in? If it is, I want to render that. Otherwise, I want to render an empty string. Now we no longer have that. And if you go back to your context and let's hard code the true here, now we have that back. So basically this is the component every single time checking what we have. Of course we can go there without logging in, but just to show you how does that work. Okay, so initially now we have kind of what we want. We have a component, we have links, and now what we need to do is basically handle this state, make that dynamically, right? So if you go back to the user context here, what we can do is create a function that will figure that out for us. Okay, so if you provide a little bit of space here we're going to define default value handler. I like to be very expressive with the names. This is basically, we'll say a const user. We can check the local storage if you can get a user item instead, and that's basically, we can say if user return true, otherwise return false, right? So basically if I have a user, I want the value to be returned as a true, otherwise I want to return false. And then I can pass this function here, and that means every time the components render, it's going to check for the value and we'll set the value as a default. Okay, so in this case, if I refresh, the user is actually logged in, as you can see, so the value is true. However, if I remove the value, you see that I need to refresh so that the value goes away, but once I refresh, now the value is false. So let me log in and show you again. So we want to fix that, and that's exactly, see, I logged in. Why can I not see the value? It's because the component renders first than the time that it checks for the local storage. Okay, so that's a thing that you need to keep in mind. So the way that the browser works, it first renders the page and then it's going to check for the local storage, and that's why we want a global state. Because having a global state, if I refresh, that is fixed because now it checked again the value. And if I log out, the same thing, it keeps it here, but if I refresh, it works. So what I want to do, I want to fix that, and that's exactly why we're using a global state, because now I can use set is logged in, and I can change the value when I need it. So basically what we want to do, if you go back in the top nav, you can first, when you log out, you want to set this to false. That's the first thing you want to do, right? And then you can copy this line entirely, and we have two pages where we can log in as well. So if you go here and then importing we are in the login page, import user context from user context, like so, but we need to add here. Then basically I will paste that line that we copied, and then we have is logged in and set is logged in. And if you go here where we have a logging handler, so let's check where we're setting that, right? If you have a user, so here you're logging the user and sending the user to the dashboard. So here he wants to set is logged in true, right? Otherwise it's gonna catch an error and you don't want to change, so that's correct. And basically here we're not checking to see if the user is logged in this page. So I just need that. And basically in the register page we're going to do the same thing. So if you go in the register, you can paste it, that's there. Let's import our user context here, and then this is from user context down there. So now the same thing, when you're registering, we check to see if the user was created. If it was, you want to set this to true, because this page we will need to import the user context. I think in logging as well. Yeah, I missed that. Use context. Okay, so now basically every time that you log in, see it appears. That's fine. I can go to the events page, it will be there. I can refresh the browser, it will be there. Okay, but if you log out, it goes away straight away. Again, yeah, it's working like we wanted. The next thing that we want to fix, let's remove that and make a drop down menu, right? I think it will be much more professional looking. So that's what we're doing next. So in order to create a drop down menu here, it's a little bit easier than what we did so far. So we're gonna basically go to the dashboard over here. Gonna scroll down. So we want to transform the button group into a drop down menu, and that's what we're gonna do now. So basically I will give a space here. I will create exactly what we want on top of that, and then we're going to delete that after that. So we're going to need to import a few things on top. By the way, you can find these components on the React Strap page. So we need a drop down, we need a drop down item, we need a drop down menu, we need also a drop down toggle, and I think that is all. Basically we need to add a few functionalities. So down here after the event requests, we want to add a const. This will be a drop down open, and set drop down open. This is not capital, it's drop down open, like so. This will be equal use state, and this will be initialized as a false. Let me delete that because to be consistent. Yeah. So then the next thing that we want to define is basically a toggle function. This will be basically an arrow function that sets the dropdown open to be whatever the dropdown open, different from what dropdown open was. So basically, if it was false, we'll set to true. If it was true, we'll set to false. Then we're going to scroll down there, and we are ready to start building our dropdown here. So the first thing that we want to do is a dropdown tag. This is the tag that gets the state. So if you look here, it has it's open, and then basically here we want to pass a dropdown open, right? And the toggle, that will be our toggle function. This is responsible to open and close the dropdown. Then inside we have the actually dropdown that will be toggled. So it's the dropdown toggle, and this will be called filter, and we want a color to be primary, could be like so. And we need to pass a caret here. Caret is a caret, right? So then below that we're going to have a drop down menu, and then inside the menu will be all the drop down items that we need. So we're going to create one, and then pretty much will be copy and paste for the other ones. So basically the first one will be the all sports, like so. There's a few things that we want to do here, and it will be basically copy and paste this here. Okay, so our sports, I'm gonna copy that and paste like so. And we also will have my events, so we can basically copy this one for extra times. Here will be my events, here will be running, cycling, and I forget swimming, like so. Okay, now let's copy and paste like this. Will be running, my events will be my events handler, so my events will be my events handler, like so. And here will be my events. I think the other ones will be probably easier to copy and paste on top. So running will be running, cycling will be cycling, like so, and swimming will be swimming, like so as well. If you now go back to the page, we should have a filter button. It's selected in our sports. If we go in running, it should be running selected. It is. Can change to my events, cycling, swimming, or all sports. Much better, in my opinion. So now we can delete these ones, right? And there you have it. Now we fix 2 extra things. I'm gonna release this video because it's over 30 minutes, and I will, following this one, like we did for the episode 10 AB, I'm gonna be releasing the version B, where we're gonna start to work actually on the requests, on the notifications. Okay, so keep tuned, and guys, thanks very much for following this series. I hope that you are enjoying. Leave your like, share with your friends, and please help me to support this channel so that we can create more free bootcamps like this one.